Welcome back to Bros in the Landfill, the second worst use of your weekend, but the third best use of your Monday.
Your hosts for today are Ashen One Tar.
Ooga Booga?
And I'm the stupid guy who just kept throwing himself off a cliff, Dizzy.
You did do that, didn't you? That was very cringy to watch.
Wait, hold on, when did this happen?
On cast.
Oh, I need to go rewatch that episode because I forgot. See,
you kept trying to make a jump across a chasm, and then you just didn't make the jump at all, and you fell down below, and there were these weird mushroom things, I think.
Oh, that's different. That was the footage.
Yeah.
What am I going to record this week? God help me. Anyways, yeah, so, see, I don't have a lead-in now.
So, Dizzy, what's your opinion on Dark Souls?
It sucks.
Why do you think it sucks, Dizzy?
Give me an easier lead-in. You know what, let's start with a rarity for DSY. Let's talk about why I like it first, or what I like about it.
Oh, snap! Dizzy, we're getting positive vibes from the Dizzy. This is wholesome cast now.
Well, I was going to say about this, because you said you played it very briefly, and then you stopped playing it.
Yes. I played the first game. I did the opening dungeon. And then I kept meaning to pick it back up, and then just never did.
Well, I was streaming myself trying to finish all of it on my YouTube channel a little while ago. I haven't picked that back up. But I was going to say, what would you say deterred you from picking it back up? Just lack of interest, or...
So, you may or may not have figured this out about me by now, but I like to create pasta piles of hobbies tall enough to ride most roller coasters. And I can't juggle all of them at once.
Yeah, Dark Souls is kind of a long thing to sort of stick your head in. Kind of depends. I mean, people beat the game in 3 hours.
Damn, that's a speedrun?
Yeah, there's a lot of ridiculous speedruns about Dark Souls. And then the thing about me and Dark Souls is, I have, this huge kind of swarming mass of things to say about it, and every kind of bit of it interlinks.
My speedrun experience is SpongeBob, which is SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom, which theoretically can be beaten in less than 53 minutes. Well, it hasn't been done yet, but it's theoretically possible.
Well, I mean, you can do a Dark Souls speedrun where you fall through the floor so you can get an item, so you can complete a quest line to talk to a person.
Say, hey, you can do that in SpongeBob, too.
You can't do that in Dark Souls. I made it up.
Oh. Well then, you sure played me for a fool.
Do we still have to keep doing this topic? Because the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm realizing this is, ridiculously difficult for me to talk about.
Well, you said you had some positive qualities.
It was my topic choice, but it's kind of like everything I look for in a Dark Souls, everything I look for, the big draw to me of Dark Souls is basically none of Dark Souls, which is funny.
Wait, so then what's your big draw to Dark Souls?
Well, basically, it's like Dark Souls, at least 3 and 2, have, just extensively big, kind of character creator, and also a world that is rich enough in lore and vague enough in lore that you can kind of fit yourself into the picture however you want. You can say, I'm this person from this place, and I do this, and it kind of it makes sense. It's basically you can stuff anyone in there. It's almost like Crossover Central.
References that nobody's going to get. That didn't really seem like the picture for me. It seems like everybody there just has a sword, so the only thing you can do is sword thing.
Well, you played the first game, and the first game is really funny to me, because I played the first game second, or technically third in the series, because I played Bloodborne first. Now, Bloodborne is good, by the way, you should go play it.
Unless you're a skeleton, in which case you might also have a bow and arrow.
You went down to the tomb, didn't you?
I played the first dungeon.
The catacombs are not the first dungeon.
It was the prison. It was the asylum.
Those weren't skeletons.
Wait, there aren't. I thought there were skeletons in the asylum.
No, they're just really malnourished.
What were the things that I fought then?
Those were hollows. They're just really They're basically zombies.
Oh.
No,
I thought they were skeletons.
No, the skeletons are in the catacomb, which was one of my big problems too with the original Dark Souls, which is that you can soft lock your entire save file basically by going into the catacombs totally blind and then accidentally locking yourself in there.
Oh, wah.
Like, I guess a big thing I have to say about Dark Souls a lot is, like, a lot of the thing that people bring up, like the fans, Bandai, From Software, and everyone is like, Dark Souls is so great because it's tough but fair, and I still hear that said today, and it's complete bullshit. And yes,
elaborate.
The thing is, like, Dark Souls is A, not tough but fair, and B, shouldn't be tough but fair. But basically, it's a game that, like, where pretty much the rules are constantly stacked against you. Like,
isn't that kind of the whole point of the game, though?
Yes, but it's the game. The people keep saying that the game is, like, so tough but fair, but it's not, because there are multitudes of rules that apply only to you that do not apply to others, and situations that exist that couldn't exist in a fair situation. But again, too, it's fine that these situations exist. It's just that it's being marketed incorrectly. Yeah, it's the pretense and the arrogance. Like, whenever you, like, something like a lot of people say too, is that it's hard to get into Dark Souls, not because Dark Souls is a hard game, but because just it has such a freaking toxic community. Like, help, you type in, like, help, I'm being killed in the catacombs, what do I do? And then everyone just says, get good. And it's like, well, thanks. That helps me so much. You hear a bunch of stuff too.
That sounds that sounds like a scrub mentality. Hell, what was I just about to say? Like, yeah, the only boss I've ever fought was that asylum dragon, like that fat dragon with a big stick.
It's like all enemy, like, you're basically equipped with. See, like, this is messing me up, actually, because I'm very unfocused about this.
The game tells you have a sword in your inventory. Well, it doesn't tell you you have a sword in your inventory, but it gives you one, and it expects you to equip it.
That's just standard of an RPG.
I was just like, yeah, that's fair. But like, I didn't think, like, I'm not too specialized in RPGs, so I didn't think to look at my inventory because I thought it was empty. So, like, the first time I see this dragon, like, I've just been beating up hollows with my fists, and it was working. Then I see this giant dragon, it's like, oh, does the game expect me to punch out a dragon? I mean, I'll do it. I absolutely will. Death of 1,000 cuts, bitch, let's go.
Yeah, someone did that. It took them approximately 12 minutes, I believe.
I didn't last 12 minutes.
See, like, I have a whole lot to say, but, like, I'm so strapped for, like ways to talk because everything that I want to say kind of, like, bleeds into everything else I was going to say. So I'm like, give examples of unfairness. And it's like, well, there are, like, one thing I was going to mention is magic, but then I have to explain magic to explain how magic is stacked against you. Or it's like, what about miracles? Well, then I have to explain how miracles are stacked against you. What about pyromancy? Well, then I have to explain how pyromancy is stacked against you, but also kind of isn't because because enemies don't ever use pyromancy for some reason. But I just realized, like, you don't fight very many evil pyromancers in Dark Souls. Mostly just sorcerers.
Well, one thing I can say about Dark Souls is that for a combat-centric game, I really don't like how the combat feels. It doesn't feel like it flows very well at all.
Dark Souls 1 is super janky. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, your character is horribly slow. One thing that drives me absolutely insane.
I noticed that.
one thing that always drives me insane in every Souls game, except for Bloodborne, is like you can only put your shield up in the direction that you're facing, which doesn't sound too bad, except for the fact that
Except this is a game that constantly gangbangs you.
It's a game that constantly like jumps you and harasses you with a bunch of enemies, and if you need to like make a tactical retreat or something, you could turn around and then get knifed in the back and die.
Oh yeah. I'm trying. Yeah, like it just feels like super slow in a game that probably shouldn't feel super slow.
I guess like
and like I noticed this. Like I haven't actually played any of the Souls games other than Dark Souls 1. But it doesn't look like the combat is any more fluid in the sequels.
The thing about the sequels is like the sequels just give me a headache too. Like I played 3 first. 3 was the first Dark Souls game I played. And like I found very swiftly that every Dark Souls game from 1 to 3 is almost completely different. They're basically not even the same franchise. Which was a thing.
Really?
Which was it was a comment I had to make too. Or like I was saying, like Dark Souls 1 comes out and starts the fan base. Dark Souls 2 comes out and everybody hates it. Dark Souls 3 comes out and everybody hates it. Dark Souls Remastered comes out and everybody hates it. And I'm like Dark Souls 2 is so weird because it's basically not Dark Souls at all. And then Dark Souls 3 comes out, and it's so weird because it's basically not even Dark Souls at all. You have a completely reworked system, a completely reworked hub, a completely different universe.
Is Dark Souls 3 like completely different from Dark Souls 2?
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I mean, different setting,
So you just have like this triangle, and all 3 of the Souls games are on different points?
Pretty much, yeah. And it's like weird. It's like Dark Souls 1 has a whole bunch of systems, many of which were dropped in 2. New systems were created, other systems were reworked, and it's like pretty much a different game. And then 3 changes things more. And adds more mechanics in. It takes out older mechanics. It 3 you might almost like because it's a lot more fluent. Like your character is way less janky in 3 and way more fast flowing. But like everything is so like weird too. Like in 1 everything was janky and it was just like you had to like make a decision between like really slow ass weapons and like accounting for the delay or really fast weapons, and then 3 was like everything is super fast so the slow weapons are useless. And then like whole things of the game are like retooled, but they're
everything
not retooled
is fast,
properly.
But there's still slow weapons. What?
Yeah, because it's like in Dark Souls 1, you have a big weapon like called a Great Axe, for example, which is a giant big hunk of metal that you like swing, and it's slow as hell, but it does a whole lot of damage. But everything in Dark Souls 1 is slow, so you have to like weigh your options of like when you should attack and drop down the axe. In Dark Souls 3, the Great Axe is the worst weapon in the game because it's stupidly slow and everything will just stun lock you to death if you try to use it.
Okay. But it still does massive damage, right?
No, it does terrible damage. Heavy infusion, max stats with resin will get you less damage. Will get you less overall damage and be just less efficient than just whacking him with a longsword. Because the thing about Dark Souls 2 is that not only do you have to worry about raw damage, you also have to worry about, like, stamina management and stuff. Like, I'm talking about the I'm almost talking about the stuff I like about Dark Souls, but it's like... You know what? I just had a thought.
Okay, what's your thought?
Dark Souls is like Shadow the Hedgehog. Like, every
We're going here again, boys!
Like, okay, so for reference, Try is playing Shadow the Hedgehog, and him, Lunch, and I got into like a big kind of argument about things, and Lunch and I were sort of mentioning that a lot of the mechanics in Shadow the Hedgehog nullify one another. Like, the game is, Shadow moves super fast and has abilities that teleport him forward in the stage, but the stages are made to be, like, done slowly, and, like, you're supposed to be killing specific things, but, like, the targeting is all messed up, and who you actually attack and when you attack is ridiculous. You can't aim. It's like just like everything is like layered on top of one another and just kind of like gets in the way. And it's like, and certain systems just kind of nullify other systems.
So how does that relate back to Bloodborne or Dark Souls or whatever we're talking about?
Bloodborne is weird because the only difference between Bloodborne and Dark Souls, in my mind, is pretty much just a name change. Because,
The
like, if
blood. Okay, so another question:
yeah,
which Dark Souls is Bloodborne most like?
3, because they use the
3?
same engine for both.
Okay, all right.
God,
Yeah,
like,
the only difference I really noticed
see, like,
in
I really want to stop
like
talking
when
about this honestly, because like,
the
I
only
have
difference I really noticed in combat between from what I remember of Dark Souls 1 and seeing you play Bloodborne is that the run speed is increased.
can we still start off with the episode because like.
No?
Because like I'm getting a headache about this because I basically have like a giant like I guess my brain right now is like a whiteboard just full of things to say, but then I'm like looking over and I'm like, what am I talking about? And like I'm just sort of like spitting out a bunch of nonsense. Like let me bring up the fact that it's bullshit to say that Dark Souls is tough but fair, and then transition into how straight swords are better than great axes, and then transition from there into like this and that, and I'm like, wasn't I trying to talk about something? Like I'm super out of focus right now, which is really frustrating because there's a lot that I want to say, but I don't know how to say it.
Okay. So let's try to go back to the tough but fair again.
Let's do that one last, honestly.
Okay, let's do that one last. So, what's another aspect that you want to talk about?
Like I never got into like
Breathe.
like I was gonna say like things too about like I guess like to put it to another way, like when I play a Dark Souls game, whether it's 3, 1, 2, or Bloodborne, and I can't even speak for anyone else, honestly, I can only speak for myself. To my own understanding, what the main draw of the game is the absolute like character customization and creation. Like you can play this game with lightning powers, you can play this game with magic, you can play this game with fire, you can play this game with any array of swords and stuff. You make your character, you clothe your character, you make the character you want to make. And like that's
Interesting.
which to me was like the biggest draw, which is funny because that has nothing to do with the actual gameplay, world exploration, story, plot, or anything else. Like I'm in it for.
Well, I mean, obviously, you have to work within the confines of the skill tree you're given.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the other thing too about Dark Souls is that you pick what stats you want to level up for, and it's like every single time I played a Dark Souls game, I had to re-roll my first character because I had no idea what I was doing upon starting. I tried to make one kind of character, and then I found out that I hit a wall because my character was too even and was not good enough in any one category to be good enough in any one category. So I had to like restart and then make a focused build.
So, okay, good to know that in Dark Souls you can't be a jack of all stats.
So you can, but only like on New Game Plus 2 or 3. Like
Okay.
it's really advisable that you start like with one
You have
thing.
to you have to build some manner. You have to specialize in something.
But that's the other difficult thing too, because when you first play Dark Souls, like you have no idea how long it's going to take to upgrade a specific point. Like you don't just learn magic by leveling up. You have to buy spells from a magic merchant. And if you like start as a mage, you're like, all right, well I've already got magic. I'm already shooting magic. But then you kind of have to hit. You kind of get hit against a wall because you're like, ooh, I need more points to use this sword, and I have not found a magic merchant yet. But if I don't put enough points into magic, then my spells will be weaker. Which is also frustrating because it basically is like Dark Souls is basically saying to you, you need to make one character specifically to fail so that you can make an entire other character to play through everything you've already done, but this time know where you're going. Or you need to check a walkthrough, which at that point you might as well not even play the game.
Oh.
See, I'm not making any of my points properly, and it's giving me a headache. I'm just like going all over the place.
That wasn't the point made properly?
No, because the point I was going to make was that I hate the Dark Souls community. Like, not all of it, of course, but like there's a lot of like just bunches of assholes. I've actually gotten legitimate hate mail playing Dark Souls on PS4, which, by the way, thanks PS4 for giving anyone the ability to just send anyone else messages whenever you want of whatever you want. Just real great. No kinds of protection there. You can spam my inbox with just as much hate as you want, and I can literally do nothing but delete it. But it's
I mean, that's the course of action.
But it's like you have a bunch of people that are like that just have like all these crazy rules and restrictions and like all this other stuff, or like they'll hate you or all these things, and like all these names and just insults and violence and stuff. And it's like, which is weird to me because it's like, to me, the draw of the game is the fact that you can play it however you want. But then you have people that are like, oh good, we have an S-stock user, kill him. Oh, this guy's healing while I'm trying to kill him. What a bastard. I should, like, I have to, like, grieve him, too, after I kill him. Oh, this guy's, like, he's running away. We have a runner. And it's, like frustrating.
Those guys are just scrubs.
No, they're
just scrubs. Don't pay them any mind.
It's hard to not pay them any mind when they're 80% of the community.
That's fair.
Like, there are whole YouTube channels dedicated to, I kid you not, the phrase hate mail. Like, people that are saying, like, just they're making the most ridiculously unbeatable build to, like, F with other players so that they can laugh about their angry comments. And there's, like, a lot of them. There's just a lot of them.
Like, there's a lot of YouTube channels like this, or there's a lot of messages going around towards these YouTube channels?
Both.
That's fair. Yeah, like this. Like, I'm trying to formulate my own thoughts around your thoughts.
I guess Dark Souls
is
kind of
find
like
something to really pick at.
I guess it's kind of like Shelvington, but run by half the world and also with less rules.
More references that people aren't going to get.
It's kind of like the nature of the game of play it your own way has led to the just immense spread of people who do play it their way, but their way is to be a dick to everyone else.
Oh, I thought you were going to say their way is better than everyone else, and everyone else who plays a different play style is wrong.
Well, that's what they'll tell you. And it's like, that's the other thing too, it's like anyone that uses this kind of spell or does this is just an idiot, and it's like the whole draw of the game is to be able to play it however you want, and yet you have a bunch of people that are angry that other people aren't playing it the same way that they are.
Well, I mean, at the same time, though, as long as different things will have different stats, there will be something that is more optimized than anything else. Like, in competitive Pokemon, I haven't been following the scene lately, but I think it was either Gen 6 or Gen 7, there was, like, this massive tournament, and the top 6 placements had... So you had a team of 6 Pokemon, right?
Uh-huh.
All 6 top placements had 4 of the exact same Pokemon.
Well, yeah, there's optimization and stuff. I mean, there's, like, some armor sets that are just better than other armor sets.
Thank you, Motorcycle. Very cool.
What doesn't help, too, is that Dark Souls' matchmaking is absolutely garbage. So basically, it's like, you don't even really need an optimized build because, like, that people have you not only can, but many people have, like, made builds specifically to, like, get the most powerful, unupgradable weapons and, like, basically beat the game and then go back to level 1 to kill people who just started.
Oh, no. That's toxic.
Tough but fair.
I said toxic, not tough.
Toxic but fair.
Toxic but fair. Hashtag toxic but fair.
I think the other thing, too, is, like, they talk about, like, Dark Souls being, like, this great learning experience, where they're like, you mess up, and then you come back and you know what to do this time. And it's like, okay, in some cases that works. Like, you're fighting a monster and you don't know how it attacks, and then it messes you up. Explain to me what I'm supposed to learn when I glitch through the floor, though, or when I get literally stuck between a wall and an unbreakable shield that the enemy is then hitting me through with a spear. I think the lesson I was supposed to learn there was to not play the game because it's horribly unreliable and terribly inconsistent.
Or just don't go over toward that wall.
It's a narrow passageway. I'm talking about a specific situation.
I was thinking big open room.
I guess it's kind of like there's an old writing phrase called like fail faster that's supposed to like help you learn stuff. And I'm actually opposed to that phrase for like the reason of just not succeeding doesn't necessarily mean you've learned anything. And Dark Souls absolutely applies to this because it's like sometimes you'll be put into a situation where the only real, like, you just kind of die and it's not even really your fault. Like you're walking down the stairs, like you're walking down a massive staircase and then you just kind of fall through the floor and die. Or like you're doing something that you've done a million times without, like, you've done it, like you're running through a place that you've run through so many times you could do it blindfolded, and just for some reason one enemy's AI acts acts differently that one time and kills you, and you're like, what was I supposed to do there? Just account for unaccountability?
Yeah, bro. Like, this game is tough.
No, it's horribly inconsistent. And kind of glitchy.
See, like, I said I didn't want to talk about Smash Bros. On cast, but I think the closest thing I've done to Dark Souls that isn't Dark Souls is the Spiritless World of Light playthrough that I'm doing. Plant only.
Well, it sounds like that because, like... Well, no, it's different because you don't have someone telling you to get good every time that you die.
Other than myself.
I got one shot killed while the boss was almost dead. Oh man, get good, scrub. I had 0%. Yeah, what do you want? Tough but fair. How? See, this is just...
It's not that egregious.
I don't even want to make this...
Most of the time.
See, like, I'm driving myself crazy because, like... My thoughts are horribly unfocused, and I'm listening to myself as I'm saying them, and I'm saying, this doesn't sound like someone who has a lot to say. This sounds like someone who's just whining.
Well, I mean, like, I don't have the experiences you do, but I mean, what you're saying sounds correct. Like, I can see absolutely everything that you're saying happening.
Dark Souls games are, like, very, very frustrating because, not only because of the games themselves, but also because of the community surrounding them. I think like, Aaron Hansen had a quote once that he was saying while he was talking about Majora's Mask, where he's saying, like, it's not just that it's a bad game. This was Aaron Hansen saying this, too. He's like, it's not just that it's a bad game, but it's also, like, the surrounding feelings of it, too, of the people, like, talking about how good it is, or, like, saying there's something wrong with you for not liking, like, how bad it is. But he's saying it's like being kicked in the balls, and then people being like, what? Like, you have a problem with being kicked in the balls? Being kicked in the balls is my childhood. Or, like, they think there's something wrong with you for being upset about that. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what I think about Dark Souls. It's like, it does not feel fun or rewarding, and it certainly isn't tough but fair. And it's like... it feels contradictory almost and inconsistent, and it's like, again, too, maybe it's just me, but I always thought that the biggest draw to the game was like its 300 armor set library, its immense amount of spells and magics and different things and swords and weapons, and the idea that you could play it however you want, and yet, like, everyone is just telling you, like, fuck you, play it my way. Never use this weapon because because I hate it. People that use this spell suck. I'm gonna grief you because I'm an asshole. And then it's like, now stop whining. Get your terribly overpowered early game weapon so that you can breeze through the entire game. Get ridiculously high level armor, ridiculously high level weapons. Stuff yourself with buffs and all kinds of buffs, and then go back to level 1 where someone is just running around with starting game armor and doesn't even have time to get ridiculously OP, so that we can go and kill them. And
Is
it's
that
like,
a thing in Dark Souls 1, though? I don't
yes,
remember that being
actually.
a thing. Oh,
Yeah,
well
that was a thing
then.
in Dark Souls 1, yeah. Like, I was running around level 1 just trying to get items to upgrade my giant sword. I was trying to level up so I could get my giant sword, and then I get invaded by some asshole wearing, like, full hovels, which let me explain to you. Hovels are just the best armor in the game.
Okay.
They're just the best, which is also a little bit frustrating because hovels are just the best armor in, like, all three games.
What
They
makes them so good?
Their
Do they
stats,
just have like a high
they have
durability stat or whatever it is?
they have the highest defense of all kinds of all armors.
Okay, is there like multiple defense stats, or is there like magic
Yeah,
resist and
it has the
like
highest
physical
slash
resist?
damage. It has the highest slash damage defense, the highest thrust defense, the highest blunt defense, the highest magic, fire, lightning, darkness, uh, and status ailments too. It has the highest poison, bleed, curse. Just it's literally the best armor.
Okay,
And
and you said this armor is easy to pick up.
In Dark Souls 1, you get it at the halfway point. So being
Okay,
invaded by someone wearing it at the at the starting game point basically means your sword's gonna do like shit nothing to it.
okay. Now you were saying earlier that the game is stacked against you in all different sorts of ways. Like you keep bringing up this concept of difficult but fair, and how it's not.
Well, I say
But
that too.
you also said that it takes a long time to explain why it's not. I want to know why it's not. We have time.
Well, the thing is, like, I feel like even if I poured my freaking heart out to you right now, I would like not be able to explain it, and then I'd just like ring you up at 1 in the morning and just start like giving you examples. But I guess like for starters, in the very first game, let's talk about magic really briefly.
Okay,
Like in the very first game, you didn't have your magic was weird because you basically had ammunition for your magic, and once that ammunition ran out, you couldn't use that spell anymore.
so
So
like
you
Robin in
wanted
Smash 4,
kind
like
of,
Robin in
except
Smash.
Robin recharges his magic. The only way to get your magic back is to rest at a bonfire, which resets the area.
Okay,
But anyway, so yeah. But so basically, you have like a limited number of, attacks per spell. So you wanna. So the idea is to just stockpile a bunch of spells or stack together spells to get more shots with them. But enemies don't have that problem. Like they have unlimited magic, just straight away.
okay then.
So, and magic in Dark Souls 1 is stupidly powerful and stupidly toxic. Like, in Dark Souls 1, there's a status ailment called Cursed, which if you're cursed, you're fucked. Basically, your maximum HP is cut in half until you uncurse
Fun.
yourself, and you can only uncurse yourself by either going into one of the most dangerous areas in the game or by getting an item, which is hard to get your hands on, to break the
Okay.
curse. And players can just invade other people's worlds. Also, you can do this too to like early game people if you're a complete monster, where you just get yourself a crystal weapon, go into an early game person, and then just kill them with it, and then they're cursed, and then now they have half HP at level 1.
Wait. Hang on. If you're cursed, does that not go away after you revive?
It does not go away until it is either removed by a sort of priest man or until you get a really specific item.
Oh!
Yeah, so you're just gonna be cursed for a lot. At that point, you might as well just restart your entire save file.
Oh, that's kind of not very cool at all.
Yeah, and 2, they replaced cursed with a different system called petrification, which just instant kills you.
Oh.
And then in 3, they brought curse back, but they also basically just made it instant kill you, and that was all it did.
Okay.
So curse has never been the same since 1, because curse was broken in 1. Although in Remastered they brought it back. Because Dark Souls Remastered was bad because they literally just resold you the very first game without fixing anything.
It was it was a graphics update, wasn't it?
It was a graphics update that was so bad that streamers of Dark Souls Remastered got messages asking if they were streaming the Remastered.
Uh-huh.
Also worth mentioning too, never forget, Dark Souls 1 released on Steam unplayable, and freaking hackers had to go in and mod the game to make it freaking run.
Ooh.
Never forget. Never forget. Your precious, your Bandais and your FromSofts, they don't love you, and they also don't know how to code.
Oh. Well,
Pretty much, though, I guess what I was going to say was, like, no matter how resilient your armor is, there pretty much is nothing that can stop you from just being ganged up on. Even though the game tells you that it's like a learning experience and you're supposed to like manage all of your resources and your weapons and your stuff. That's a theory anyways. The problem is, again, is the inconsistency, which keeps coming back to it, because things keep going differently and you have to like basically you can't like go in planning what you're gonna do, but you're told you have to. Because things will change immediately the moment that you try to like start a thing. Like, even on a second playthrough, you'll be like, I did this last time, and it worked, and then you do it this time, and it doesn't work. Because one tiny thing decided it would act differently. Like, you run into a room, you get ambushed, you get killed by a whole bunch of monsters, and you're like, you take a deep breath, and you're like, alright, that one was just whatever. I got ambushed. This time I'm ready. You run in, you swing at the monsters, you kill some, and then more monsters appear behind you and kill you, and you're like, where did they come from? So then you go even further. You just start looking around. You're like, where did these monsters come from? You can't find them. You run in the room. The exact same thing happens again. You like spin your camera around as you're dying, and you're like, oh, I guess they were in front of me, and then they walked behind me while I was killing the other guys. So like, all right, I'll just stand in the hallway now, and then the monsters are coming, and then you swing at them, and then your sword bounces off a wall. And I'm not making a good point now. Because I'm actually more than right
You're
now,
making a point.
No, I'm actually making a point against myself. Because this sounds like the tough but fair that people are talking about, but my argument has now shifted to, does this sound like fun? Because it's not really. You'll be like walking across a narrow passageway full of pendulums, and you have to like just stand in a specific spot so it doesn't hit you. Alright, makes sense. And then you're standing there, you've done this a million times, and then just for some reason you're standing there, you still get hit by the pendulum, you fall to your death, and you're like, what did I do wrong? I stood wrong, apparently. You're not really learning anything because you knew what you were supposed to do, but it failed because of really no reason.
Well, I mean, there is a difference between knowledge and execution.
You're gonna have to say that again.
There is a difference between like knowledge of what you're supposed to do and knowing how to execute what you're supposed to do.
I'm saying
like
it's more
like your execution might have been a little bit different that time around.
Well, yeah, but that's because Dark Souls 1 is terrible lighting.
Oh, true.
You never really got to this point, did you? But, like, 1 is just awfully lit. See, again, like,
I remember it being pretty awfully lit.
See,
also, it doesn't help that my TV is right next to my window, so if I'm not playing at night, I have awful glare.
See, this is all just, like, driving me insane, because it's, like, everything I'm mentioning, again, too, like, I'm listening to it, I'm not convincing myself, because I have more that I could be saying, but I can't remember what it is on the fly. It's like, I'd rather, it's like my Persona 5 rants, where it's like, I'd rather just make a gigantic, long Word document about it, so I can remove all the fluff, and I can only have the points that I was actually trying to make. Like, my brain is scrambled like an egg right now, and I'm, like, desperately trying to explain to you why I think this game is bullshit, but also why I think no one really cares that it's bullshit, myself included.
Well, I mean, you have been convincing me that it's bullshit a little bit.
It's like, if this game was tough but fair, you and your enemies would be able to do everything to one another, but it's not fair. Like, enemies with bow and arrows or enemies with crossbows have unlimited arrow range, while your arrow range basically is non-existent.
Really?
Yeah, enemies can shoot you from, like, I have actually tested this. You can be shot with arrows far outside of your own arrow's range. I get shot with arrows while running around, and then I like pull out my own arrow. I aim back at them. I fire. Arrow doesn't hit them, or it hits them for 1 damage because of severe damage reduction based on distance.
Is that a thing in that game?
Yeah,
For
it's a
you?
thing. It's a thing in the game.
For you, not for them?
For you, not for them. And again, too, you have like enemies that you have enemies like magic users that can just spam you with like the insane with just high level magic spells infinitely, while you only have like 2 shots with your best magic spell. Like fighting clerics is the worst because there's a spell in Dark Souls that's called Great Heal. Guess what? It fully heals you. Guess what? You can only use it like once or twice. Guess what? Enemies have unlimited uses. So if they're losing
that sounds rough.
Yeah, so if you're losing the fight, and people will say, oh, well, you should hit them with an anti-heal item, and it's like, oh, you mean those things that are like really hard to get your hands on, and also that are basically useless because most enemies don't heal, so you're saying I should just have a whole bunch of them on hand for like 2 or 3 people that I didn't know were going to kill me.
You gotta be prepared, bruh. Like, items exist for reasons.
You get stun locked.
I'm not saying I'm not saying that I'm going to use nest balls in Pokemon, but they exist for reasons.
The only Pokeball you need in Pokemon is the basic Pokeball.
The only Pokeball you need is the Quick Ball.
Yeah, but I hate the Quick Ball.
Why do you hate Quick Balls?
It's
Dizzy, is there something you're not telling me about that you don't like Quick Balls?
Well, see, the thing about that and Quick Balls is, like, with Dark Souls, I'm, like, driving myself crazy because I have a lot to say, but I'm not saying it properly. With Quick Balls, I have no idea. It's like,
I was just trying to make a penis joke.
What? I don't get it.
I don't know either, man. Just roll with it. It probably made sense to some 12-year-old.
Here's my thoughts on Quick Balls as told by Solid Snake while doing the Codex call in Smash Brothers Brawl about Sonic the Hedgehog. There must be some reason you don't like him. Nope. Just don't like him. There's no special reason. I'm just not a fan of Quick Balls.
Okay. That's fair. But anyways...
Is it fair, though? Is it tough but fair, Tar?
Help me. Anyways, you were going on about items and how specialized items.
Enemy items are basically infinite. Enemy spells are basically... Well, not even basically. Enemy items are infinite. Enemy spells are infinite. Enemies are unaffected by status ailments or enemy human characters. If you die, you lose all your souls, and you gotta go back and grab them, and if you die again, then they're just gone forever. Which isn't really a difficulty thing to me, because you can still get those souls back if you just spend more of your what do you call that? Your finite time just getting more of it. Your finite, your unrefundable time. Like, that's the thing to me. NPCs that you're trying to save can die through no fault of your own because another NPC just runs in and kills them, and NPCs are only programmed to respond to you attacking them for some stupid reason. Just, here's the friendly merchant guy. Let me go talk to him. Oh no, an axe guy showed up. Oh no, I can't swing my sword while I'm in the menu. Oh no, the axe guy killed the merchant guy, and then he's calling me an asshole because I guess he's only programmed to respond if you kill him. Fucking Priscilla moan glitch. Softlocks your entire save file.
Yikes. So... I'm conflicted right now because, like, a lot of people do have a lot of fun with this game, but
like,
I'm trying to figure out if I'm supposed to be happy that I put the game down or not.
Well, the thing is too is, like, I don't like a lot of shit that a lot of other people like. I would never say, like, well, I would never say these exact words of, like, you should think the way I do or anything. Except you should totally play Bloodborne. That game is good. You should play it with me and try in 2 years.
And like also you're saying like the main appeal is like the wide array of customization.
It's definitely the wider range of customization because it certainly isn't the map design.
I thought the main draw to the game was that it was just ball-bustingly hard.
Well, that's the other thing too about like Dark Souls that's hard for me to call it tough but fair is that at the very beginning of the game you get like freaking screwed all the time. At the very end of the game, you basically hit like the upper tier and you're just stupidly powerful.
So
like, it does not have a good difficulty curve because it starts at 11 but then it never goes higher and you start at like 3 so you're like this is bullshit and then eventually you get to 12 and you're like I could be playing anything else right now. Like First, I thought I wanted to put down the game because it was stupidly tough. Now I want to put down the game because it's boring.
So then, another interpretation you could have for this is that you spend the beginning of the game grinding up to be a badass mofo, and then you spend the rest of the game being a badass mofo.
I know you ripped that from Yahtzee, but
yes, I
still
did.
No. Because the enemies and stuff don't act... Because the enemy scaling and the difficulty scaling... Like, Dark Souls is super weird. Like, let's compare Dark Souls to Pokemon real fast. In Pokemon, you start out with, like, a level 5 Charmander, or a level 5 Pikachu, or a level 5 Rattata, or whatever. And then you start running around the world, and there's just a whole bunch of enemies and monsters that attack you, bunches of trainers, and you have to slowly get stronger. But as you get stronger, the world has to get stronger around you in order to increase the challenge. Because if you go back to like level 1 or Route 203 from Ruby and Sapphire or something, like none of the level 3 enemies can do anything to you. In Dark Souls 1, you can be level 72 and just an all-powerful sorcerer, go back to level 1 because you need to use the merchant, and get stun-locked to death the exact same way that you got stun-locked to death at level 3.
So,
like, there's a reason why a bunch of people speedrun the game with their character being naked the entire time. The reason is because armor doesn't matter, life doesn't matter, and basically as long as you don't get hit, you're gonna be fine. Because being hit
just don't get hit.
Never get hit. Being hit is the death knell, and armor is useless unless it's to fight other players with hovels, and all they have is an unupgraded short sword.
Shoot, I just had a thought.
The game's difficulty scaling is non-existent.
So, would you say that the game would be improved if the high-level enemies were put at the low-level dungeons and the low-level enemies were put at the high-level dungeons?
I don't know. I think the game would be improved if they were fucking finished before they were released.
Oh.
Dark Souls 1 has this infamous level called Lost Islet that was completely sold out to a different company. And then apparently 2 was rushed to completion to what I've been told, and so was 3. Like, and so was Bloodborne, actually, now that I think about it. Like, all of them were rushed at the very end.
Well, I mean, like, at the same time, like, the absolute scale of these games, to my understanding, is virtually unparalleled. Like, they have to kind of rush in order to... It's not?
No. Well, I guess it depends upon your own viewpoint. I personally would say no. I would say the best game in terms of scope was 2, because Dark Souls 2 was a game that exhausted me to death, while 1 was a game that just... Well, it also exhausted me to death, but for different reasons. Dark Souls 2 is... See, like, this is what's driving me crazy. I keep saying this. This is the 4th time I've said that this episode. But it's like, I have so much to say, but I have so much to say about every freaking individual basis. The community, the individual games, how the games stack up to one another, the mechanics, the world, everything. Like, for as much as people talk about... Like I could go on, like, a whole 30-minute rant just about the map design. Like... Dark Souls 1, which I don't like very much, has this central area called Firelink Shrine, and while many people praise the fact that everything can just be tied back to Firelink Shrine, that it's the grand central station of Dark Souls 1, I think it's actually kind of distracting, and it makes the world feel horribly small when you're running all over the planet and somehow ending up right back at Firelink. Like, people talk about how big this game is, and I'm like, how am I supposed to feel the scope when I basically have never left home? It's like starting in your dining room and running around your entire house, and your dining room is Firelink.
Counterpoint. Isn't that just isn't that just every game with a hub town or a hub area, though?
Well, first of all, Dark Souls is selling itself. One of its selling points is its size. And second of all, I'm actually struggling to think about games with hub points because I don't play too many of those. Pokemon doesn't really have a hub point. See,
SpongeBob has a hub point.
I would argue against that too, because there are plenty of games that have really small maps that feel really big. Like, one of the biggest games that I've ever played that See, this is funny, actually. I recommend you a lot of shit that I play, even though I know full well you're not going to play it. This game, I like this game. I don't think you would enjoy it. It's Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne on PlayStation 2. That game I just don't think you'd have a taste for. But that game is massive. It not only does it have like a million locations, every single location is used really, really effectively because like you go back and forth between them a lot and you like really flesh out just where everywhere is. Nowhere in the game is wasted. And Dark Souls 1 kind of wants to do that too, but its nature and its mapping is not well worked out. And like to me, it's kind of just frustrating. It makes the world feel really small when everywhere is just connected to one point.
What I'm getting is that the Dark Souls mapping system is trying to be a tree, but it's closer to a flower. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Are you seeing what I'm trying to say here?
Yeah. Like, everything is supposed to be intertwined and branch out in a really massive way, but it just kind of is a big circle. Or it's all within one circle. And like I compare this to Dark Souls 2, which also has a HUD system where everything branches out from the HUD in like 4 different directions. And eventually that game is much more akin to like a treasure map, I guess, because you start from point A and then you go all the way to point Z or point wherever the last point is, and then you come back home and you take a different route. Or you go on multiple routes at once and then switch between them at will with your warping system. And then Dark Souls 3 has...
Another thing I should ask is, even though everything is connected to... what was it called? Like Firelight?
Firelink.
Firelink.
Yeah.
How far does each kind of flower petal extend?
That's the thing, too, is like... I personally would not say very far at all, really.
Really?
Like, you can take an elevator from the basement of Firelink, and then take that elevator down to the forest, and then the forest leads to the Burg, and the Burg is still connected to Firelink. So you basically just complete the circle. And then it's like, from Firelink, you can go into the Catacombs, and the Catacombs is its own area that can only be accessed from Firelink, and it basically is a straight... Like, it's... The actual map isn't a straight line, but from the way that I'm explaining it, it's basically Firelink to Catacombs, end, like dead end. That's it. Go back to Firelink now. Then there's Firelink to the very last stage in the game, also a dead end. Point A, Firelink, point B, Firelink, altar, end point. There's nowhere to go after that. Firelink to the Undead Church. The Undead Church leads to the Burg. Burg leads back to Firelink. Undead Church leads to the Forest, which leads back to Firelink. Firelink is connected to this really ultra-important place called Sen's Fortress, which is, again, too, ties back to Firelink. In order to get really deep in the game, Or like in order to get further in the game, you have to go like super deep underground and find like this whole place that's connected to lava and stuff. And then you take an elevator out of it once you're finally finished. It's medieval times, so it's an old-timey elevator. And you just get back up, and then look at that. The elevator took me right next to Firelink. How convenient. And it's like, I never really feel like I'm making progress when I'm just ending all the way back in Firelink over and over and over again.
I don't have too much experience with this game either, but you know what this sounds like?
What?
Yume Nikki. Do you know Yume Nikki?
That was a game? Wasn't that an anime about, like, future journals and people killing each other?
Dream journals, I thought.
Something like that.
Like, dreams? I have no idea what Yume Nikki is actually like. I saw it played, like, I saw one person play it, like, once.
I'm gonna look it up.
And I had no idea what was going on in any of it. All I know is, like, the main character turned into a snowman at some point.
Oh, no. This was a... Yeah, I don't really know very much about this game, but it's not what I thought it was.
Okay.
But, I guess it's kind of like that. Dark Souls 2 had a much better map, which is... God, I could just go on about Dark Souls 2 forever, honestly. Like, Dark Souls 2 had a much better map because it felt like a much more sprawling map that was connected by much longer passageways. And then Dark Souls 3 had the worst maps in the series.
Oh.
Dark Souls 3 maps were terrible, which is funny because everything I have to say that's negative about them, I can almost hear people saying, well, they're supposed to be that way. And then I go, yeah, but that doesn't mean that it was a good idea. Like, the whole point of Dark Souls 3 is that the entire world is being, like, condensed into one small area. But as a result, like, the maps have no real cohesion with one another. So, like, suddenly, like, first you're in, like, a tower, then you're down in a forest, now you're in the catacombs, then you're in a frozen city. It's literally just like that. But the other problem, too, with Dark Souls 3's maps is that they're just not well made in general. Like, the game starts out pretty linear. The very first stage is pretty nice and expansive, but from there, it just becomes more and more of a straight line, until you hit the halfway point of the game, where you are almost literally running down straight lines. And you cut out.
No, I wasn't saying anything.
Yeah, three's map. It's funny. It's like 3 is the game I played the most of, and it has hands down the worst maps. I don't even like 1. I made the comment. I hate how it feels like I'm always stuck in Firelink. 3 is just play a really bad Sonic game.
Oh!
Play Sonic Generations on 3DS. You've played Dark Souls 3 maps. Just hold down triangle, boost forward endlessly, or just get into a never-ending spree of homing attacks. You'll get to the end of the level eventually. Don't kill enemies. There's no point. Just run right past them. 3 was not a well-made game.
What about Bloodborne's maps then?
Bloodborne's maps were good. Bloodborne's maps are funny because they're kind of like Dark Souls 1 maps, but with much less...
Except done properly?
Well, kind of. It's like what I was saying. Part of my problem with Dark Souls 1 was that, like, it talks about this big world that I don't feel. Bloodborne doesn't have any of that pretensions, so it doesn't feel like I was lied to.
Okay.
But also, Bloodborne maps are also really good because of... God, like, I just remembered something. Like, there was this YouTube video that Sleuth showed me, because Sleuth also plays Dark Souls games, about, like, this guy who was talking about how he hated the warping mechanic, which, for reference, in Dark Souls 1, until you get to the 3rd act of the game, you have to walk back and forth between everywhere. It is only at the 3rd act that you can start teleporting between checkpoints. And walking back and forth between everywhere in the game is really arduous because your character is really slow. It's probably the reason why...
the entire game is really slow.
Yeah, so you just kind of spend a lot of long expanses either A, being afraid of being killed by a monster so you can trek all the way back to where you just were so that you can eventually get to your destination, or B, just having long stretches of nothing happening while you walk for like 3 or 4 minutes, which doesn't sound too bad until you check your watch and start counting down the seconds as you're like, yep, still walking through this forest. Yep, still going. Oh, look, a door. Oh, I made it. Now I can walk some more. Doopy-doo.
That sounds fantastic.
But yeah, at the third act, or like, you know, the very final act of the game, you're supposed to go just to every corner of the map. So imagine Firelink is in the middle of a square. In the third act of the game, you're supposed to go to all 4 corners.
Okay.
And then the game designers were like, yeah, we're making you walk everywhere, but going back and forth between all 4 corners is bullshit, so here's a warp mechanic. And the warp mechanic is great because walking back and forth between everywhere, even though everything feels so small, is just tedious. It's not difficult, it's just boring. And then in Dark Souls...
It's gosh, what's it called? It's, I don't want to say it's Hyrule Field. Is it called Hyrule Field?
Hyrule Field?
Hyrule Field in Ocarina of Time, like that massive expanse.
Maybe. I haven't played a lot
of... Hyrule Plains.
I think I know what you're talking about, though. Yeah, I think
no, Great Plains. Great Plains? I think it's the Great Plains? I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of like that.
You know what I'm trying to say.
I know what you're trying to say, yeah. It's not hard, it's just long and arduous, and then you're given this warp mechanic. And then the warp mechanic was used in Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3 and and in Bloodborne. And like, I'm bringing up this guy's video too because he was saying how much he hated the warp mechanic and how much he thought that walking back and forth from everywhere helped create this feeling of the world that was like really good. And he was saying that the warp mechanic is distracting in Dark Souls 2 and 3 and Bloodborne, and it makes everywhere feel disjointed. And I was saying, okay, from personal experience, number one, like, it's almost hard for me to talk about Dark Souls 1 because I never got into that world because I had to walk everywhere. Number 2, Dark Souls 3 maps don't feel disjointed because you can teleport between them. They feel disjointed because they were poorly made. Number 3, Dark Souls 2 maps are probably one of the best in the series because they don't feel disjointed. The warp system doesn't really work. The argument against it doesn't really work there. Number 4, Bloodborne is great because of its warping system, because the game is supposed to make you feel on edge. Like there are whole sections of the games where you're literally trapped. Like, you are in a separate world, and it's like, yeah, you're supposed to feel disjointed. You're not where you used to be anymore. You are in an alien world. It is not normal. Like, the ability to walk... there's a part of Bloodborne, actually, I don't know how much I want to say about this, because Try's going to hear this. But there's, like, parts in Bloodborne where you're basically abducted by aliens, and your only way back is the warp system. Your only way back and forth is your warp system. You're not in Kansas anymore, Dorothy. And it's like, yeah, and it's like, it really helps because the whole theme of Bloodborne is, like, the unknown, fear, anxiety, like, concerns, the monsters lurking in the shadows, the monsters looking under your bed. Yeah, it uses disjointedness really, really well. Like,
we finally got to the positives that we advertised at the beginning of this episode.
No, I was saying the positives was the extensive character creation and pathways.
Well, yeah, that too.
You can make. God, like, well, you know what? You know what? I keep mentioning this. Fuck it. I'm just gonna devote this entire last bit to Dark Souls 2 because I have not been able to get a clear thought this entire episode. I'm just like, fuck it, this is just specifically Dark Souls 2. I'm just going to drop the pretense, start talking about Dark Souls 2. I don't like this game. I don't know why. And other people don't like this game, and I don't know why. Like, Dark Souls 1 was the first game in its series, technically after Demon's Souls, but again, it changed a whole lot from Demon's Souls, like the entire universe, and the leveling up mechanics. And pretty much everything is different but the controls, and even the controls are different. Okay. And then Dark Souls 2 is super confusing to me because Dark Souls 2 feels like such a sequel. Like, they took a bunch of stuff that wasn't well thought of or wasn't well planned out, and they, like, planned it out better. They worked on mechanics that weren't utilized. They added just so much more stuff. Like, hey, that weight system didn't really work. Let's make a better weight system. Hey, in Dark Souls 1, your weapons can break if you're not careful, but they never broke because the durability system didn't work. Let's make a durability system that works. Let's have more. Hey, if you run out of spells, you're fucked. Let's have something to make spellcasters be able to regain magic abilities, or like, you know, ammunition for their magic spells. Like, hey, there's no light in this game. Let's create an actually really interesting torch mechanic system, where in which you have this torch that with a timer based on it. That once the time runs out, your torch runs out of fire, and you can increase the timer by getting more torches, and you can use the torch's light to set things on fire, light more torches, light passageways, do things like the torch was really good. Hey, this game looks like shit. Let's make the sequel look fucking beautiful. Like, Dark Souls 2 is beautiful. Or at least Scholar of the First Sin on PlayStation 4. That's what I was playing. Like, that game looks amazing. It really does look amazing. I cannot stress that enough. Majula is beautiful. It's like, and then they're like, what else was there? Like, like they added so much. Hey, what happens if our players run out of their only healing item source? Well, let's make some more healing item sources. And while we're at it, let's make... Well, if we're going to make more healing item sources, things might get easier. Well, let's make some more status ailments. Hey, let's make a whole bunch of different kinds of status ailments. Let's make weapons that can inflict specific status ailments. Let's do this and let's do that. Let's just add more stuff. Let's fix stuff. And I'm like, I'm listening to myself saying all this, and I'm like, Dark Souls 2 really freaking improved on Dark Souls 1, which is why I'm confused why I don't like it, and why I'm confused other people don't like it. Like I said before, too, like I made a comment. I said, like, Dark Souls 1 came out and created the fandom. Dark Souls 2 came out and everyone hated it. Dark Souls 3, da-da-da. Like, people hated Dark Souls 2. People still hate Dark Souls 2. I played Dark Souls 2, and I'm, like, having trouble fully expressing why I don't like it, and have an even harder time expressing why other people don't like it. I know, don't get me wrong, I know why people don't like 3, and I absolutely know why people don't like Remastered, but 2 is weird, like, it's...
So you made 2 sound awesome!
Yeah, like I really enjoyed 2 when I first played it, and except the game was, like, the game was massive, too, like, I had to stop playing it because I just got exhausted, like... I beat, like, a whole bunch of bosses. I got really deep in the game. And then I just, like, started, like, passing out. And I was like, my save data said I'd been playing for, like, 40 hours. And I was like, am I almost done? I was like, I need to take a break, Dark Souls 2. I can't keep playing the same game this long. People speedrun the game in, like, 3 hours now.
I'm wondering if maybe you don't like it because you needed the context of Dark Souls 1 in order to make Dark Souls 2 good.
No, I played Dark Souls 2 last.
Oh.
I played 3.
Well, then in that case, you needed the context of Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 3, and Bloodborne to make Dark Souls 2 good.
No, I played all of... No, I mean, I guess. Like, I'm trying to put my mind into the perspective of people who, like... I'm trying to put my mind into the perspective of people who played 1 and then played 2, but
I'm thinking
even still, it's giving
people
me a
who played 1 maybe didn't like 2 because well...
Dark Souls 2 was the closest to tough but fair that Dark Souls ever got.
Maybe it's because it screwed with the Dark Souls 1's fan base of difficult but fair. I know how to talk right now too.
It was like that Steve Jobs comment that he made once when he made like the random feature on the iPod Shuffle, and then everyone hated it, and then they made an algorithm that made the shuffle less random, and then he said like, yeah, we made things less random to make them feel more random, and I'm like, yeah, is that what's going on with Dark Souls? It's like we made things more fair, but people hated it, so we made them unfair to make it feel fair.
That, huh?
But like, that's the other thing too. Like, there were like, oh god, I never even mentioned that too. Like, in Dark Souls 1, there was this entire brand of magic that was called Dark Magic that was awful. Dark Magic was stupid broken. It was basically the atomic bomb. Like, it'll kill anything pretty much instantly. There's no defense for it, and it doesn't even have an element. Like, I was mentioning how hovels are the best armor in the game, but, like, hovels have
This
defense.
is the one way around the hovels.
Pretty much. This is the one way around everything. People use dark magic to two-shot kill the final boss.
Oh!
Like, it was stupidly powerful, and basically, when I say too, it was like the atomic bomb. All you needed to do was be able to use it, which is the thing I should mention too. Like, the greater strength stat you have, the more power you can do with strength weapons. The greater magic stat you have, the more damage you can do with magic weapons, or with magic spells. Dark magic, you just had to be able to use it, and that was it. The rest was history.
Is there like any sort of specifications that you
Not really.
have?
You just need to have.
You just need the tomes, huh? Or
you just need the magic requirement, yeah. And even then, the magic requirement was like really low. It was like 16, which most people can get like pretty much immediately.
This was probably a part of the setup that people were pissed that other people aren't using, huh?
Well, kind of. People were pissed that other people were using it because it was so stupidly powerful. Like, you enter, like, someone else invades your world, instant kills you with Dark Bead, and then you're like, okay, cool, what was I supposed to do about that? But, like, in Dark Souls 2, they took darkness and made it its own element, and then they made they like, made more spells for it, and they made it, like, they basically turned this broken nuclear warhead into, like, a full-on legit weapon. Not too powerful, but definitely strong enough to, like, hold its own. And they, like, gave it a lot, and they, like, gave it all kinds of, like, extensive additions to it, too. Freaking Dark Souls 2 is the only game in the series where you can play left-handed. I forgot to mention that. For some reason, in Dark Souls 1, 3, and Bloodborne, you can only have your weapon equipped in your left hand and your offhand in your... Sorry, you can only have your weapon in your right hand and your offhand in your left hand. Like, anything in your right hand you'll attack with, and anything in your left hand you'll defend with. Even if there's a shield in your right hand and a sword in your left hand, you'll attack with a shield and defend with a sword. Because that makes sense. But, like, Dark Souls 2 was the only game that said, what if you just didn't? What if we just programmed it so that you attack with a weapon in your hand? Whatever hand your weapon's in is your attack, and then the shield is your defense. Hey, while we're doing that, what if we just make whole-on weapons?
2 was the only game that did that?
Yeah.
It reverted back to the left-right system in 3?
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know.
Because difficult but fair!
Because fuck you, left-handed people.
Lefties don't exist and play video games.
Lefties didn't exist in medieval times. This is more realistic. Like, yeah, what else did they do? Like, yeah, 2 added more spells. It added more kingdoms. It had, like, a bigger world. It had, like, it was a bigger game with better polish and more stuff. And everyone hated it. And then I played it.
Did 2 retain that level of custom? Well, I probably did, because you were going on about all this stuff that it added.
It had more weapons. It had more kinds of weapons. It had, like, so much more optimization. It had the ability to... It also made it easier to, like, freaking... It also made it easier to freaking, like, multi-level your character. Like, because they had weapons that worked for 2 different kinds of playstyles. Like, here's a sword that's also a wizard staff. So now you don't have to choose between the 2, because you can have both. Dark Souls 2 added the Soul Vessel, too, which let you restat your character, so you don't have to make a second freaking character just to know where you're going. Because the first time around, you can be like, I wanted to be a wizard, but I couldn't find the wizard man. And it's like, oh hey, I found the wizard man. I could still be a wizard. I just have to take all this strength that I don't want and add it to magic, and then I can cast spells like I wanted to. This is cool.
It kind of sounds like the difficulty was lowered a bit for 2, and maybe that's why... Like, maybe that's even why you didn't like it.
No, well, that's the other thing, too, is, like with 1, I never felt like there was real difficulty. With 3, there wasn't any real difficulty. With 2, I mean, 2 was fine. But, like, not really. The only boss I remember hating in Dark Souls 2 was just a poorly designed boss in general. Like, I would have hated him in any game.
Okay, what was his deal?
His deal was that he's a big monster in a pool of lava, and you have to punch his fists when he hits the ground you're standing on, but the ground you're standing on is really, really small, so 90% of the time, the boss doesn't kill you, you just accidentally walk off the stage and die.
Oh, well then.
His greatest weapon was you not being able to see where you're going. But, like, Dark Souls 2 has some, like, really well-liked bosses, or just some really powerhouse, like, monsters throughout the game.
But all of them felt satisfying to fight except for this one?
Well, I can't speak for the Dark Souls community, nor would I want to, but, I mean, I thought a lot of them were pretty cool. Some of them were puzzle bosses, some of them were brute strength, some of them, like, I'll say this, there was definitely more boss variety in Dark Souls 2.
It sounds like in Dark Souls 2 you really need to be able to be well-rounded. Like, you were saying in Dark Souls 1, the game punishes you for being a jack of all stats, but it sounds like in 2, that's a necessity.
Yeah, in 2, you really need to, like, be prepared for pretty much anything. You have to have, like, really good adaptability. Like, there's, like, one boss early on in 2 that's, like, this big, like, robot man with, like, a giant halberd and a shield, and you have to kill him, and then you kill him, and then you succeed, and then once you've killed him, 2 more show up, and you have to kill them, too. There's, like...
Although, that point that I just made, like, about being a jack of all stats being a bit of a necessity, does that kind of cut down on the customizability of Dark Souls 2?
I wouldn't say so, no, because you can still do like how you can still play it how you want. Like you can be a jack of all trades, but you can also just be like, F that, I want to be massive sword man.
Massive sword man.
I want to be Guts from Berserk. By the way, Dark Souls took a lot from Berserk. Like, I was told there was references, but it wasn't until I checked the wiki and found nearly everything was reference to Berserk that I was like, huh. Like, they basically ripped the main character and made him his own person in Dark Souls. Like, everything was the same. They're both described the same way. They're both compared to wolves. They both fight with this gigantic sword and this big shield. Both of them have their left arms broken. Both of them are affected by darkness. Both of them do the same kind of big spin attack. Both of them are are revered as heroes, but turn into big monster guys that have to be killed by someone else. And it's like, what the hell? Both of them have the exact same super jump leap attack. Like, please stop.
So the takeaway of all of this, the takeaway of this podcast is, if you really like Dark Souls, you should just binge Berserk instead.
The takeaway of this podcast is, if you have a whole lot to say, write it down, focus your thoughts, and don't waste an hour of people's lives, like, just recklessly spitballing. Because I don't know what you're talking about, Tar. I absolutely don't feel like I made any points this whole episode. And, like, the more I think about it, the more I'm, like, remembering shit that I didn't even touch on. Like, I kept mentioning inconsistency. Like, the universe of Dark Souls doesn't make sense and is inconsistent. But that's like talking about Dark Souls lore. Like, do I want to
We're not here for the lore. We're here to slashy some dragons and shit.
Like, do I want to start mentioning how the Dark Souls lore doesn't make sense? Do I want to start mentioning, like, how these characters don't make sense? Do I want to start mentioning the map? Like, I brought up map design. How deep do I want to go into the map design rabbit hole? How about I mention the fact that in Dark Souls 1, there's an entire level of the game that you can just skip to the end of?
It sounds like this decision for you is difficult but fair. And this has been Bros in a Landfill, signing off.
I've hit a new low.